Before restaurants existed in this world, a chef had only one purpose: to serve the nobility. But did you know that the very first restaurant was actually born out of the common people's resistance against the nobles who treated them as if they weren't human? This is the movie Delicious.
This man's name is Pierre Monceron. He is the personal chef of a French nobleman named Le Duc de Chamfort. Pierre is a widower. He and his son, Benjamin Monceron, have worked for years in the Duke's grand palace. In the middle of supervising the other cooks, a palace servant named Hyacinth came and delivered a message that the Duke and his guests liked Pierre's cooking today. They even asked Pierre to make another dish. Not wanting to disappoint the Duke, Pierre immediately ordered one of the cooks to deliver his new creation, which he named Le Délicieux, or in English called Delicious. In the 18th century, nobles had many ways to show how rich and classy they were, from wearing fine clothes, building luxurious palaces, to showing how good their private chef's cooking was. While the guests were eating, the Duke called Pierre to hear their comments about his latest dish. One by one, the guests began praising Pierre's food. Unfortunately, there was one guest who did not like it. He said the food tasted like garbage and was only fit for pigs. Hearing that insult, everyone burst into loud laughter. Feeling that his noble pride had been humiliated because of Pierre's cooking, the Duke shouted and ordered him to kneel and apologize. However, as a chef, Pierre also had pride. He would not accept his cooking being insulted, even after years of service. Instead of apologizing, Pierre chose to leave the palace. Together with Benjamin, he went back to his father's house. That night, when they arrived, they found that his father's house was partly destroyed. His father's neighbor, Jacob, explained that a few months ago, Pierre's father had died of a serious illness. The poor people who used to come asking for bread were disappointed because since Pierre's father had died, there was no more free food. They had ransacked the house searching for food. Having no other place to live, Pierre had no choice but to sleep in whatever space was left that night. The next day, after tidying up, a man came asking for food at Pierre's house. In the past, Pierre's house was indeed known as a resting place and dining spot for weary travelers. Usually, they would pay for the food as much as they could. Since Pierre was in the storage room, Benjamin was the one who cooked for the man. In the storage room, Pierre was approached by a woman named Louise. Louise said she used to be a cook too, and every cook in the country knew about Pierre's skills. That morning, when her friend told her that Pierre had just quit his job, Louise immediately quit too, so that she could learn cooking from him. Unfortunately, without hesitation, Pierre refused to teach her. That evening, while eating, Benjamin asked why his father didn't apply to be a private chef in another noble's palace. He believed if other nobles tasted his food, they would be hooked. Pierre replied that after decades of working in the Duke's palace kitchen, to him, that kitchen already felt like home. Right now, he was just soaking. But if one day the Duke came to ask him back, then Pierre would return. The next morning, Pierre saw Louise in his storage room. Louise begged again for Pierre to teach her how to cook. She didn't mind paying, as long as she could be accepted as his student. Actually, Pierre didn't want to accept her, because at that time, women were considered unfit to be chefs. However, Louise's persistence impressed Pierre. He finally agreed to teach her. Day by day passed. Pierre Louise kept learning to serve guests, help wash, and tend Pierre's farm. Until one day, they caught orphans stealing flour. Pierre was not angry. Instead, he said that tomorrow he would do what his father used to do: distribute free bread to the orphans. Hearing that, Louise smiled happily. Pierre then asked Louise why she lied. He knew from the way she walked that she was not a cook. From what he observed, there were only two possibilities. Either Louise was a noblewoman or a prostitute. Pressed again and again, Louise finally admitted the truth. She had indeed been a prostitute. Realizing her mistake, she decided to repent and try to become a great cook to prove she deserved a second chance. Hearing that honesty, Pierre was touched. They then went into the forest. There, Pierre asked Louise to find some edible plants. When they returned home, Pierre explained which plants were edible and which were poisonous. That night, Pierre taught Louise again about various spices and ingredients. As a cook, Louise had to train her sense of taste. Pierre then asked her to close her eyes and fed her ingredients one by one. At that moment, Pierre slowly began to be captivated by Louise's beauty. Caught in the moment, he wanted to kiss her. But suddenly, Louise opened her eyes and pointed a knife at his neck. The next morning, Pierre saw Louise serving 2 guests who were dining in his house. When Louise came in, to avoid awkwardness, Pierre tried to talk to her. He said that last night he made a mistake and regretted it. Pierre promised it would never happen again. Fortunately, Louise forgave him. They both agreed to forget about last night. A few days later, Hyacinth visited Pierre's house to deliver a message from the Duke. 2 weeks later, the Duke would hold a dinner party to welcome his new friends from Paris. But the Duke wanted to hold that party at Pierre's house. Pierre need not worry. The Duke would send several servants to decorate the place into a luxurious setting worthy of nobles. Before leaving, Hyacinth asked Pierre to cook his best dish, because if the Duke was satisfied, maybe Pierre would be reinstated as his private chef. Pierre accepted the offer. The next day, full of enthusiasm, Pierre would explain the decoration concept and the dishes he would serve at the party to Benjamin, Louise, and Jacob. Not long after, palace servants came delivering the food supplies Pierre had ordered. A week passed, and a messenger from the Duke came with a letter. When Pierre read it, he was shocked. The letter said the event was moved up to tomorrow. Pierre was pessimistic. He didn't think he could prepare everything in such a short time. But with confidence, Louise reassured him that everything would be ready by tomorrow. After the messenger left, Pierre scolded Louise for interfering when she wasn't the one cooking. In the middle of their argument, suddenly they heard barrels of drinks crashing down. When they checked, they were shocked to see Jacob buried under the barrels, badly injured and dead. After Jacob's funeral, Pierre told everyone to get back to work. They had to finish the preparations for tomorrow's event. That night, Pierre kept cooking. He no longer cared that the kitchen was a mess, as long as the food was ready before the Duke's party. While checking the pudding in the storage room, Benjamin was there. Upset, Benjamin asked why his father kept cooking, even though Jacob had just died this afternoon. Had his father lost all feelings? Pierre replied that just because he didn't cry didn't mean he wasn't sad. But no matter how sad he was, he didn't have time to cry because there was still too much to do. While father and son argued, Benjamin accidentally knocked over the oil.
After the fire was put out, Louise treated Pierre's burned hand. Pierre was devastated. In this condition, there was no way the event could be ready on time, especially since now he would struggle to cook with his badly injured hand. Louise tried to encourage him. She said there were still 9 hours before the Duke came. All Pierre had to do was trust her. The next morning, the two of them started cooking. Seeing Louise so serious in following his directions, Pierre was once again captivated. Soon after, palace servants arrived and began decorating Pierre's yard. While everyone was busy, secretly, Louise slipped poison into one of the dishes. Just as the preparations were finished, the Duke's entourage arrived at Pierre's house. Strangely, instead of stopping, the nobles continued their journey. After that, Pierre received a letter canceling the party. The Duke thought Pierre's house was good, but it turned out to be just a small house. The Duke was embarrassed and chose another location. Louise was furious, smashing the decorations. Suddenly, her anger turned to panic when she saw Benjamin about to eat the poisoned food. Louise quickly threw it away. Seeing Louise's strange behavior, Pierre grew suspicious. Inside the house, when they were alone, Pierre pressed her to confess. Cornered, Louise finally revealed her secret. The real reason she wanted to be Pierre's student was to kill the man who had ruined her life. Before meeting Pierre, Louise had been the wife of a wealthy nobleman. Her husband had long been a business partner of the Duke, until one day the Duke fell in love with Louise and tried to seduce her. Because Louise refused, the Duke was hurt and did something desperate. He killed Louise's husband and seized all the family's wealth. Since then, Louise swore revenge. Hearing that story, Pierre was deeply disappointed and expelled Louise. The next day, Benjamin tried to stop Louise from leaving. Meanwhile, Pierre, still upset, wanted to go calm himself. But because he couldn't ride a horse, he fell and was dragged. As a result, Pierre was badly injured. Out of pity, Louise decided not to leave and stayed to take care of Pierre day and night. Until one day, when Pierre had recovered, he heard a commotion outside the house. When he checked, he was confused why so many soldiers were eating there. Louise explained that earlier in the morning, a group of soldiers had passed asking for food. She had the initiative to cook them meals from Pierre's recipes. It turned out the soldiers loved the food, even asked for more, and paid extra. Overwhelmed, Louise hired the orphans to help. After the soldiers left, Louise said that selling delicious food was more profitable than just cooking for nobles. So why didn't Pierre open a place to eat where people of all walks of life could dine and be served like nobles? At first, Pierre disagreed, even expelled Louise again. But when Benjamin told him that it was Louise who cared for him while he was sick, Pierre was silent. Benjamin also said maybe this was their chance to get back at the Duke. Pierre had to prove he could make more money than his salary as a private chef. Benjamin believed that one day people would follow this brilliant idea of opening such a place. Hearing that, Pierre finally agreed. 2 days later, after decorating the dining place, Pierre asked Louise to write today's menu list. To keep customers from getting bored, Pierre would change the menu every day. Soon after, Benjamin ran to tell him that a customer had arrived, and thus the business of the first dining place in France began. A month passed. Pierre's business grew busier. One day, Hyacinth came to collect taxes from Pierre's dining place. While chatting, Louise accidentally came in. Fearing Hyacinth might recognize her and report to the Duke, Louise quickly covered her face with a laundry basket and left. Outside, Louise stood still. All this time she had tried to forget her grudge against the Duke, but seeing his personal servant there, suddenly her desire for revenge returned. The next day, not wanting to risk killing and tarnishing Pierre's name, Louise decided to leave and calm herself. To keep Pierre from worrying, she wrote him a farewell letter. Reading it, Pierre was distraught. For days he couldn't focus on cooking and often made mistakes, overcooking, mixing up orders, or making bad food. Gradually, the place became quiet with fewer customers. One day, Pierre told Benjamin that they no longer had enough money to buy ingredients. Benjamin advised that if only his father would stop sulking, the place would succeed. People came there for delicious food, not to watch an old man sulk over a woman. That night, Pierre went to the Duke's palace. Pierre told him that while not working there, he had opened a dining place, but recently it was empty. Arrogantly, the Duke said what Pierre was doing was foolish. Everyone in France knew that fine food could only be enjoyed by nobles. Commoners could never understand the pleasure of true cuisine. Frustrated, Pierre apologized. Maybe the Duke was right. He then begged, if the Duke didn't mind, he wanted to invite him to come to his place in 2 days. Hearing that, the Duke agreed, on one condition. After he finished eating there, Pierre had to shut it down and return to work in the palace. The next morning, from the information he got, he finally found Louise. She had become a nun. When they met, Pierre told her the Duke would come tomorrow. If she wanted, they could poison him together. He didn't care if his reputation was ruined or even if he was executed. For Pierre, what mattered most was that Louise stayed with him. Since she left, his heart had felt empty. Hearing those heartfelt words, Louise was deeply moved. She decided to return with Pierre. The next day, the Duke and his wife went to Pierre's house. Seeing the dining place empty, the Duke smiled smugly. Soon after, Pierre welcomed and invited his former master inside. He then brought them an appetizer, le délicieux, the dish nobles once said was only fit for pigs. The Duke was offended, but seeing his wife greatly enjoying the food, he was forced to eat too. Just as the Duke was about to taste it, Hyacinth announced that outside, a large number of commoners had arrived. They filled up all the empty seats. Unwilling to eat with commoners, the Duke wanted to leave, but suddenly Louise appeared. His expression changed instantly, but to avoid suspicion, he tried to stay calm. Louise then said that earlier she had intended to poison the Duke's food, but she thought someone arrogant like him deserved social punishment instead, to know how it felt to be humiliated in front of many people. Pierre then showed the invitations he had distributed at the market. The invitation read, "For anyone who wants to dine with the Duke, come here." Reading that, the Duke was so ashamed he almost cried. He swore that one day he would take revenge on Pierre. Hearing the threat, Louise challenged him back. If he dared, she would report all his vile deeds to the King of France. She even showed she had all the evidence that could have him executed. She then yanked off the Duke's wig, the symbol of nobility, in front of everyone. When the Duke tried to slap her, Pierre held his hand and forced him to kneel and apologize for all the sins he had committed against Louise. The Duke was speechless, his whole body stiffened with shame. Holding back tears, he ran away in humiliation. Seeing how disgraceful the noble he had served for years, Hyacinth was shocked. In the midst of his confusion, two new guests asked if there was still an empty table for them to eat. At that moment, Hyacinth realized he had been serving the wrong master all along. He finally removed the wig symbolizing a noble servant and began to serve the people who came to Pierre's place. And this was the story of the beginning of the very first dining place in France, or what we now call a restaurant.